you guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I have a review to share with you on the brand new Naked Heat palette from Urban Decay. So I did just finish filming a tutorial using this palette, which is the eye look I have on right now. I'm not sure which video is going to go up first, but if the tutorial is available, I will link it above. Otherwise, keep an eye out because it is coming soon. But I did want to film the review and tutorial separately, so that way if you have already seen a bunch of reviews and you're not interested in watching the review, you don't have to watch that portion to see a tutorial or vice versa. But we are going to be talking about this palette right here today. So this is the newest of the collection of naked palettes from Urban Decay. This is not limited edition. This will be permanent. There goes the brush. This will be a permanent item in their collection. The layout of this is just the same as all of their other palettes. You are getting 12 shadows in here and the pan sizes are the same. You also do get the double-ended brush, which just fell out of mine, like you do in most of their palettes. So the mixture, there is a mixture of finishes in here. You do have quite a few mattes. You also have some shimmers and metallics in here as well. I will be doing swatches on all of these so you can see the different textures and finishes. I just wanted to go over my overall thoughts before we get into the swatches. Usually when I'm watching reviews, I don't care so much about the swatches as what the person thinks of the palette. So I'm going to begin there and then I'll have all the swatches and everything near the end of the video. But let's start with my thoughts on this palette. I feel like the formula on these are incredible. I think they are very, very pigmented but easy to blend. The quality of these is really right in line with all the other naked palettes from Urban Decay. So if you like the naked palettes and you like their formula, you will like the formula of this. I am not in love with this palette, and let me tell you why. I feel like although the color selection really drew me in immediately when I saw photos of this, my problem with the colors in this is that there's just not that much variation between the shades. And you'll see that more in the swatches that I'm going to show you guys. I end up feeling like every single eye look I come up with from this palette ends up looking the same in the end because the colors are so dang similar. So that is the same problem I have with the Naked 3 palette with all of those rosy tones. I feel like every time I use that, it's the same look, and that's how I feel like this palette's gonna be. I feel like if I use just this palette and don't pull from any other palettes, that's how it's going to be for me. Now, just for example, there are these three really beautiful metallic shades in here, which I would call all three of these kind of eyelid shades. You really wouldn't want to use these to like blend out in the crease or anything because they are pretty intense metallic. These are the shades called Scorch, Dirty Talk, and Lumbre. Anyway, I'm going to swatch just these three real quick because I want to show you guys, even though they do look quite a bit different in the pan, when you place these side by side, you are getting a very similar look from each one of these. So, yeah, I mean, there is a difference. You can see the difference between them, but they are so similar that, like, if you created one eye look, if you created an eye look using this one day and this one the next day, I don't know that anyone would really notice that those are two different shades. Side by side, yeah, you can tell a difference, but the overall look you're gonna get from those are pretty darn similar. So it's just kind of, this one's a little lighter obviously than this one, and this one's a little deeper than the other two, but overall the shade is very similar, and I just feel like every single time I use this, my look ends up turning out the same. I also feel like it leans very dark. So even though you have just a couple light shades here, for the most part you have really dark shades in this palette. So every time I come up with a look from this, I always want like a light everyday look, and the one that I have on today is probably the lightest look you can come up with from this palette. Just in general, everything that I've done with this palette ends up looking very kind of dark and smoky, very warm toned, dark smoky eye. That's what I feel like I get every time I use this palette. So I've found myself, as I've been using this palette over the last last like 10 days or so, I've been finding myself wanting to incorporate other palettes in order to get the look that I'm wanting from this. like the first few times I used it, I just used just this palette, and then I was like, you know, I feel like it needs this, or I feel like it needs this shade. So overall, I just wish there were some more variety in shades in here. Just so many similar shades in this range right here where it just ends up being the same thing over and over again. So I hope that makes sense. Other than that, I think the formula is fantastic. It is $54, so it's the same price as all the other Urban Decay Naked palettes. So if you're wanting to just invest in like a naked palette, if you don't have any and you really like warm tone shadows, you would probably enjoy this palette, but I don't feel like it's as versatile as like the Naked 1 or the Naked 2, for example. I feel like the newer Naked palettes, the Naked 3, Smoky, and this palette all have been kind of not enough variety in the palette where you're getting the same shade over and over. As far as packaging, I think it's beautifully packaged. I think Urban Decay always does a great job with their packaging. It's very, very sturdy. You could definitely travel with it. You get the nice large mirror. You do get the double-ended brush, so you can travel with that as well. So yeah, the packaging is very, very nice, very well made, and it doesn't open on its own. And now let's go ahead and get into the swatches. Alright, so here are the swatches. I'm going to go ahead and go through starting at the top here with the lightest shade and kind of explain each shade. That first one on the top is called Ounce. It is kind of a satin finish, and it's kind of a like an eggshell color. It is actually very pretty for like a brow bone highlight or inner corner highlight. Honestly, on my skin tone, it really doesn't show up too well because it is so similar to my skin tone. Next to that, this one right here is called Chaser. That one, by the way, all of these swatches were done as a finger swatch with one swipe. There is no primer underneath, and I did not use a brush. So that one right there, even though it's showing up looking a little bit patchy and a little bit like light pigmentation on the eyes, it actually performs really, really well, and it shows up a lot darker on my eye than it did in the swatch, and then it does look in the pan. So it actually gives me more color than I was expecting when I applied it to my eye. And by the way, that one's called Chaser, but I did use that in my tutorial so you can see how it performs on the eye, because it does show up a lot more intense than that. Next to that, we have the shade Saucer. That is just like a really good warm mid-tone brown. Again, it's a little darker than you would want it to be for like a blending shade. Next to that, we have Low Blow. That is the one that is right on my wrist, and it is kind of like a camel brown, but very dark. Again, I feel like these all lean really dark compared to what they look like in the pan. This one here is called Lumbre, I believe is what it's called. That's the one I have all over my eyelid. It is a really pretty, kind of a, oh, what would you call that? Almost like a peachy pink. I cannot talk. It's almost like a peachy pink color, but it's pretty deep. And then we have He Devil, H-E. That one is just like a really good reddish brown shade, and that is a matte as well. And then right here we have, this shade here is called Dirty Talk, and that one is kind of, you know, this one has more gold to it, that Lumbre one. This one is a peachy pink again, but a really deep peachy pink, and it doesn't have as much gold to it, but it does have like a little bit of a duochrome look to it. And then we have the color called Scorched. This one here is called Scorched. That one is just like a deep, that is like a deep red metallic with kind of a gold glitter through it. So that's this one right here. Next up, we have this one, the fourth one up. That one is called Cayenne, and it's just a really orangey brown, like a mid-tone brown. Then we have this one here, which is called En Fuego. That's one of my favorite shades. It's just a really dark, rich, reddish, purpley brown. And then we have Ashes, which is definitely like a purple brown shade right here. That shows up a little patchy on my arm, but it actually applies on the eye very nicely. And then the very last shade in the palette is called Ember, and that one is gorgeous. It's kind of like a dark brown shade with gold copper like metallic through it, and it definitely catches the light really, really nicely. So I really do actually like that shade. Sorry, my swatches are in an awkward place. But overall, I do feel like these perform really, really nicely. It's just the shade range that threw me off a bit. I feel like Urban Decay could have done a better job of adding some better blending shades, because these ones that you kind of expect to be for blending show up just a little too deep on the eye. I feel like this is the only one you can really use to blend things out with. And I wish there were more lighter lid shade options that did not end up looking so dark and smoky on the lid. But I do think this is a good palette. I'm definitely glad that I own it, especially since I am a YouTuber and I feel like I need something like this in my collection for review purposes and comparisons and things like that. I definitely plan to find some dupes because I feel like a lot of these shades are shades I've seen many, many times before, but I just don't feel like there's anything unique about this palette. That's the only thing about this where I'm like, you know, again, I've seen these shades before. I have these shades in my collection. Yes, they're good quality, but did I need this palette? Probably not. If I didn't make YouTube videos, I don't think I would necessarily feel like I needed to buy this. So I hope you guys found that review helpful. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, and definitely check out that tutorial on this palette as well. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. I'll see you in my next video. Bye guys!